Governor Perry, since the Islamist-oriented party took over in Turkey, the murder rate of women has increased 1,400% there. Press freedom has declined to the level of Russia. The Prime Minister of Turkey has embraced Hamas, and Turkey has threatened military force against both Israel and Cyprus. Given Turkey's turn, do you believe Turkey still belongs in NATO?
Well, obviously, when you have a country that is being ruled by what many would perceive to be Islamic terrorists, when you start seeing that type of activity against their own citizens, then yes, not only is it time for us to have a conversation about whether or not they belong to be in NATO, but it's time for the United States, when we look at their foreign aid, to go to zero with it. And you go to zero with foreign aid for all of those countries, and it doesn't make any difference who they are. You go to zero with that foreign aid, and then you have the conversation about, do they have America's best interest in mind? And when you have countries like Turkey that are moving far away from the country that I lived in back in the 1970s as a pilot in the United States Air Force, that was our ally, that worked with us. But today, we don't see that. Our president has a foreign policy that makes our allies very nervous, and it emboldens our enemies. And we have to have a president of the United States that clearly sends a message, whether it's to Israel, our friend, and there should be no space between the United States and Israel, period. And we need to send a powerful message to countries like Iran and Syria and Turkey that the United States is serious and that we're going to have to be dealt with.
Governor Perry, you sounded like you wanted to get in when Congressman Paul was talking at the beginning of this round on foreign policy.
Well, I was just saying that I thought maybe that the noise that you were looking for was a gong.
Do you have any reaction to what Congressman Paul said?
Listen, as you know, I volunteered to wear the uniform of our country. And what bothers me more than anything is this administration and this administration's disdain all too often for our men and women in uniform. Whether it was what they've said about the Marines. Now, these young men made a mistake. They obviously made a mistake.
You're talking about urinating on the corpses.
They made a mistake that the military needs to deal with, and they need to be punished. But the fact of the matter, the fact of the matter is this. When the Secretary of Defense calls that a despicable act, when he calls that utterly despicable, let me tell you what's utterly despicable. Cutting Danny Pearl's head off and showing the video of it. Hanging our contractors from bridges. That's utterly despicable. For our President, for the Secretary of State, for the Department of Defense Secretary to make those kind of statements about those young Marines, yes, they need to be punished. But when you see this President with that type of disdain for our country, taking $1 trillion out of our defense budget, 100,000 of our military off of our front lines, and a reduction of force. I lived through a reduction of force once, and I saw the result of it in the sands of Iran in 1979. Never again.
Grant. Kelly, yes, sir. Congressman Paul.
Just a very brief statement. I, too, served in the Air Force for 5 years during the height of the Cold War from '62 to '68. So I've had a little bit of experience. Matter of fact, I was over in the Afghanistan-Pakistan region. But I would like to point out one thing about the Taliban. The Taliban used to be our allies when we were fighting the Russians. So the Taliban are people who want, their main goal is to keep foreigners off their land. It's the Al-Qaeda. You can't mix the two. The Al-Qaeda want to come here to kill us. But Taliban just says, we don't want foreigners. We need to understand that, or we can't resolve this problem in the Middle East. We're going to spend a lot of lives and a lot of money for a long time to come.
Kelly Evans.
Governor Romney, when President Obama signed the National Defense Authorization Act into law, he enacted a provision allowing him to indefinitely detain American citizens in U.S. military custody. Many, including Congressman Paul, have called this unconstitutional. At the same time, the bill did provide money to continue funding U.S. troops. Governor Romney, as president, would you have signed the National Defense Act as written?
Yes, I would have, and I do believe that it's appropriate. to have in our nation the capacity to detain people who are threats to this country, who are members of al-Qaeda. Look, you have every right in this country to protest and to express your views on a wide range of issues, but you don't have a right to join a group that has challenged America and has threatened killing Americans, has killed Americans, and has declared war against America. That's treason. And in this country, we have a right to take those people and put them in jail. And I recognize that when you're in a setting when there are enemy combatants, and some of them on our own soil, that could possibly be abused. There are a lot of things I think this president does wrong, lots of them. But I don't think he's going to abuse this power, and I know that if I were president, I would not abuse this power. And I can also tell you that, in my view, you have to choose people who you believe have sufficient character not to abuse the power of the presidency and to make sure that we do not violate our constitutional principles. But let me tell you, people who join al-Qaeda are not entitled to the rights of due process under our normal legal code. They are entitled instead to be treated as enemy combatants.
Senator Santorum.
I mean, I still got time, so as long as I still have time, I just want to go back and agree with what Governor Perry said. The most extraordinary thing that's happened with this military authorization is the president's planning on cutting $1 trillion out of military spending. Our Navy is smaller than it's been since 1917. Our Air Force is smaller and older than any time since 1947. We're cutting our number of troops. We're not giving our veterans the care they deserve. We simply cannot continue to cut our Department of Defense budget if we're going to remain the hope of the earth, and I will fight to make sure America retains military superiority.
Senator Santorum, 30 seconds to you, sir. Same question. Would you have signed, as president, would you have signed the National Defense Authorization Act into law as written?
So he gets 2 minutes and I get 30 seconds.
Take whatever time you want.
Okay. First off, I would say this. What the law should be and what the law has been is that if you are a United States citizen and you are detained as an enemy combatant, then you have the right to go to federal court and file a habeas corpus petition and be provided a lawyer. That was the state of the law before the National Defense Authorization Act, and that should be the state of the law today. You should not have, if you're not an American citizen, that's one thing, but if you are a citizen and you're being held indefinitely, then you have a right to go to a federal court. And again, the law prior to the National Defense Authorization Act was that you had the right to go to a court and for that court to determine by a preponderance of the evidence whether you could continue to be held. That is a standard that should be maintained, and I would maintain that standard as president.
Congressman Paul, a different question. Your plan to...
Why can't I answer about that one?
You were included in the question in the first place. Do you want 30 seconds to respond to this?
I need a minute. No, I think we're going in the wrong direction for the protections of our liberties here at home. They're under deep threat. The Patriot Act has eliminated the Fourth Amendment. We now have a policy of preemptive war. You don't have to declare war, and you don't even have to have an enemy. We can start the wars. That's what preemptive war is all about. Now, with the Military Appropriation Defense Act, this is major. This says that the military can arrest an American citizen for under suspicion, and he can be held indefinitely without habeas corpus and denied a lawyer indefinitely, even in a prison here. Let me give you one statistic. You're worrying about all these, where we're going to try people, where are they going to do? We have to do it secretly because our rule of law is so flawed. We have arrested 362 people related to al-Qaeda top operation. 260 of them are in prison. They've been tried and convicted. So don't give up on our American judicial system so easily, I beg of you.
Kelly.
All right, change of topics. This question to Governor Perry. What measures would you immediately take to improve the housing market? Or do you consider any such intervention to be an overreach of government?
Well, obviously, the first thing we need to do in this country is cut the tax rate down to where the people feel confident that they can risk their capital and have a return on their investment. That's the reason I laid out a simple and flat tax of 20% with their home mortgage deduction and charitable expenses and local taxes, get rid of capital gains tax, get rid of the benefits tax, get rid of the tax on Social Security benefits, and then take 20% of that and mail your check in. I mean, even Timothy Geithner can get his taxes in on time with that type of a system. And That is where we need to be focused, is creating jobs, is pulling back those regulations that we talk about since '08 that this administration have pushed into place that have strangled jobs. Getting America back working. That's what I've done for 11 years as the governor of the 13th largest economy in the world. 1 million jobs have been created in that state, and our housing market not only is pretty solid, it's growing, and it's doing because we have created that climate where job creators know that they can go out and risk their capital and have a return on the investment. As the President of the United States, that's what I'm going to do, is to walk into Washington, D.C., work towards a balanced budget amendment to the United States Constitution, and try to pass a constitutional amendment, if the people will accept and work with me, to make Congress a part-time body. So they stay less time in Washington, D.C., they go back home and get a real job like everybody else has, and live under the laws that they pass.
So beyond moving to a part-time Congress and encouraging the rest of the nation to follow Texas in terms of job creation, you would take no pointed measures aimed at helping the U.S. housing market?
I think I said two things that are pretty powerful. Cut the taxes and cut the regulations, which will increase the jobs, and people will have the income to come in. I don't think it is the government's responsibility. Look, we've already seen that with Freddie and Fannie. We don't need the federal government in the housing market anymore. They need to be out of the housing market.
Jerry Schaap.
Governor Romney, in the book you wrote just before this campaign began, you said you were surprised that the press in the last campaign didn't press for more specifics on how to fix Social Security and Medicare. So let's fix that tonight. Let me ask you specifically, would you reduce the cost of these programs by raising the retirement age for Social Security, by raising the eligibility age for Medicare, or by reducing benefits for seniors with higher incomes?